Without a doubt, the year 2020 will go down in history as a year that actually tested the leadership acumen of organizations to operate through uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity, all the VUCA stuff. Across the board, organizations and leaders have had to deal with the shock of this pandemic. They've been left shaken and stirred, courtesy Sean Connery, our friend. And the initial stages were really about, ensuring the safety of our people, ensuring their safety, and then eventually it sort of gave way to business continuity. We need to manage our businesses. And today we are talking about resetting new realities. The entire thing has been very, very people-centric because I don't think any business has been so interrupted by people challenges as this pandemic has. And to say that CHROs of companies have had a busy time would be a gross understatement, right? I mean, clearly they have been at the front and center of everything that's happening. And it's in that context that we have invited these three amazing leaders, people of CHROs of essential services that have been there out and around the issues, while many of us had the luxury of staying at home and being catered to. They were the ones that were making sure that things were going on in the background for us to stay safe and attended to, in a sense. So we have with us Partha Das of the Manipal Group of Hospitals, the enterprises. Welcome, thank you for accepting our invitation, Partha. And even as we are speaking, just a couple of days ago, the Manipal Group has also added a chain of 19 hospitals from Colombia, Asia. So congratulations on that, Partha. You have a bigger portfolio now to manage.
Thanks, Nimi.
We have Sajid TC from the Bangalore International Airport Limited, a very celebrated and awarded airport, not just in India, but in the region, one of the busiest and one of those that's been very, very quick in responding to crises and all of that. And I'm going to tell you something very interesting in just a little bit that happened just this morning with Sajid, but we'll have to wait for that. And then we have with us Ganesh from More Retail. The people that have been providing all the food for us, all the extra food that we all ended up eating during the pandemic, but what was going on in the background as they made sure that we had what we wanted. Yeah. So given this exciting panel, I do not want to waste any more time with niceties, no ado. We are going to go straight into, asking them those questions that we have. I'm going to take the privilege of being the moderator, and I will ask some of those questions that are there right on top of my head. And the format will be that there will be these questions, and we will also provide time at the end of the session today for our participants to kind of interact with the panelists and ask the questions that they think was missed in our conversation, right? So we will ensure that you have a wholesome conversation today, and quite looking forward to that. I'm going to start by asking each of our panelists, to tell me in one word or in one phrase what it was like to be the CHRO of an essential service when the pandemic hit. But before I ask them to speak, I'm going to ask Amrita to do this, very quickly, and to all the participants here on the call, what do you think they must have gone through? So in one word or in one phrase, what do you think these CHROs went through as the pandemic hit them? As HR leaders, what are your thoughts on this? And then we will hear from them. So if we can quickly have your thoughts on the chat. Are we seeing something? Amrita?
Yeah, we just have the responses coming in, Nimi.
Mm-hmm.
So Reshmi says, unique opportunity to recreate.
Mm-hmm.
Arun says, great time. Nilanjana says, we've been WUCA'd.
Okay.
Chetan says, crisis in people management. Piyush says, an opportunity to unleash. Shikha says, maintain balance between employees and customers, keeping safety in mind.
Right.
Urfi says, stress and innovativeness to the fore.
Mm-hmm.
So we'll have them pouring in. We'll move back to the session, and we'll keep the chat.
Excellent. Yeah. So let's find out. This is what many of our HR leaders on the call has said. And let me go to Partha. Partha, in one word or one phrase, what was it like for you?
It was quite challenging and end up quite exciting also.
I'm sure. I'm sure. Thank you for that. Sajid?
Realized that the family needs to be taken care of first, and it came to the fore. And
Okay.
it was time for
So
HR to
family
roll.
first.
Say
Excellent.
family, I mean the organization.
Yes. Okay, great. Ganesh?
Intense. That's one word that just comes to my mind. And it's not just professional intensity, but personal intensity. Remember,
Yes.
we all play roles as leaders, as HR leaders, but we are also members of a family. And what
Absolutely.
happens in the family affects us personally. So we went through I went through a fair bit of personal intensity as well.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Thanks for that, Ganesh. And we will come back to talk about some of those aspects as well. So my first question is to Partha. Partha, as a pandemic, your industry was really in the epicenter of this whole thing. Okay, the impact was there on every industry and every sector, but I think you had the most immediate impact. And it was a rather peculiar problem as well, because in a sense, people needed care, they needed medical help, but they were afraid to come into hospitals, right? At the same time, you had reports that were floating around saying that health workers and doctors were carriers of the virus, and they were infecting other people. There was social ostracization. A lot of doctors were asked to leave from their flats and homes, and, a lot of very anxious moments for you as a CHRO with your employees. So what were those initial days like? If you would like to recall, because now, it's a little behind us. We've sort of made, a peace with some of those things, but those initial days would have been quite hectic and some real war stories, because your employees were the absolute frontline warriors.
Yeah, very true, Nimi. So I can't forget those moments actually. The moment the pandemic struck and it was confirmed by the lockdown by the government, and people were left in chaos actually, panic all around, and they didn't know. And we were flooded with queries how to run it from the very next day, because there was no public transport and people were hesitant to come to hospital, particularly the employees. And when the media was airing all sorts of news and videos and what was happening in France and Germany, so all kinds of chaos were there. What we did immediately, we went into a call mode. Probably our CEO, CFO, myself, all got into calls with various people, the leaders of the various hospitals, and started giving them assurance not to panic. Let's see how to handle it. And what it was around March 25th, first what we did, we released the salaries for the month of March in advance, so that if people had emergency, so they need not panic. And even people also thought whether they would have jobs, whether they would have salary cuts. They had all kinds of confusion at that point in time. So to arrest those kind of things, we spread and we released the salary, which was a relief. But having said that, next day we found that many people didn't turn up. So they were not taking the calls. Some had left for their hometown. Even from the nursing hostels, people have evacuated and things like that. So that was pretty big challenge for that time. And subsequently, in the coming days, the business started dropping in terms of footfalls were less. People also were scared. The elective surgeries were put on hold. So, but the emergency was running. So people say, for example, a dental patient, that patient can't wait for the treatment, that cannot be handled through a video consultation, which we had introduced as a other mode of treatment, just to treat the fundamental things and the basic needs of patients, but then that cannot sustain the treatment further. So emergency remained open, and then we assured people that if you contract the virus, anything happens, we are there. entire support will be taken by the organization, entire cost will be taken by the organization. So not to worry about anything, we are there behind you. And it was like a wait and watch game that point in time. So we had COVID centers, separated isolation centers inside the hospital, outside the hospital. So all those things we did. And we kept on communicating people regarding their safety measures. We educated people regarding the how they can prevent this disease by social distancing and using of the hand sanitizer, using masks, and there were PPs provided to people who were attending the patients. But that time nobody knew also who is a COVID patient, who is not a COVID patient. All kinds of patients were coming. And even government had also told that the COVID patients need to be treated at earmarked hospitals, which were dedicated for those patients. So confusion was all around at that point in time. So this
Yes.
is how the initial days. But what we did, seeing the drop in the footfalls and all, we also managed our attendance. So we also wanted to operate at about say 35-40% of our staff. So and just wait and observe, why to call all the people to the hospital and making them exposed to the risks.
Mm-hmm.
That was also some relief for people. So
Right.
this is how the April and May months were. And
Okay.
although we in the corporate office had the privilege to work from home, but looking at from the optical point of view, all the leadership team also, they came and they were front-ending the whole thing. The strategic meetings were happening. And what happened, gradually people also started contracting the virus. Maybe in the mid of April, another challenge started when the employees started suffering. Even not, they didn't get it from the hospital, they also got it from the outside. So when one employee got his entire department, they panicked. So being the primary contact, so they panicked, and that was another challenge. So what to do? Shut down the entire department, or how to manage that? So we had to continuously also take the advice of the doctors. What is quarantine some people for 3 days, wait and observe for 3 days. If they're developing any symptoms, then bring them to hospital. And so again, transportation was a problem. So we had to organize transportation for the people. So that was quite a big challenge. People across the city, from say across the country, every hospital faced that problem. So bringing people to the hospital when the public.
So you were bringing your doctors and your nurses through.
Everybody. These were relatively easier because we have nursing hostels.
Right.
So majority of the nursing crowd, they stay in the hostels. So that was pretty easy. They were in the hostel. So some people, what we did also, some nurses who were willing to attend the patients voluntarily. So we also made them stay inside the hospital and provided them all food, all logistics, everything. So, and I would also like to mention that there was a team in each hospital who were actually fearless and bold. And they did a commendable job, and they were fearless, and they carried out in spite of all kinds of panic all around and all. They were not bothered. Some doctors who were particularly the pulmonologists and all, they were not afraid of the situation. They said, so come whatever maybe, we will be there. And similar was a set of nurses and all. So we called them Corona warriors, and we appreciated them, recognized them. They were also given awards in various forums. So that was the good part, maybe the silver lining, the all thing. And gradually they gave motivation to other employees to carry on. So looking at them, gradually they started to come forward, and the fear was diminishing gradually. So this was the first 2 months. Then again, maybe I'll come back during the next about
excellent. Like you were saying, some of those employees that were there fearlessly, stars are often born in a crisis, right? And then they kind of set the way for other people to follow through. So thanks for sharing that, because, you know, we've always wondered, and we heard horror stories of doctors and of hospitals and people not being allowed in, of you know, prices being extremely high, you know, many stories. And this is one way to kind of understand what actually happened on the ground. And we'll come back and talk a little bit more about that, Partha.
Sure.
Thank you for that. Sajid, I'm going to come to you. You know, I mean, this is an unprecedented thing. Nobody was prepared for this. And as a airport, I know emergency plans are not new to you. You know, disaster management is something that you think about all the time and plan for, etc. You know, but they would have been primarily in terms of the security lens. What if there's a plane crash, God forbid, you know, what happens? What if there's a terrorist attack, for example, or if weather conditions, you know, less of a problem, but, you know, you may need to close the airport, etc. But here was a pandemic which kind of enforced a closure to hospitals and, to airports. So what was that like for you? And, you know, quite unprecedented, obviously. There were no commercial flights that were happening for sure during the lockdown, but there were emergency. You had to have your staff on the ground for emergency flights, repatriation flights. There were many things that were going on that was not in the general vision of all of us. So what was that like? And I must add here to all the people on the call today that when I woke up at 6 o'clock this morning, there were 4 deleted messages from Sajid. And I wondered to myself, you know, I wonder what these, it wasn't at 6 o'clock. I think it was about 7 something that I was looking at. I think it was the first thing that I saw. And I saw these 4 deleted messages and I wondered to myself, and I said, maybe I will text and ask, what was it that you had to delete that you couldn't tell me, kind of a thing. And I let it be because today was busy. And I found out just a few minutes ago, maybe I will ask Sajid to tell us what exactly it was. Sajid, would you tell us? And this is live, real time, happened just this morning. So Sajid, over to you.
Thank you. Thank you, Nimi. So I'll first narrate what happened this morning. There was a flight that took off this morning at 4 a.m. from Bangalore airport for an international destination. And 20 minutes into the flight, we get a revert from the pilot saying that the landing gear has got locked, which means no matter where it goes, it will not be able to land. And imagine an aircraft traveling at 600 to 700 kilometers per hour not being able to land and the gear not getting locked. So there was no choice but to return to base, which is Bangalore. We had 67 passengers on board, another 11 or 12 members of crew. Now the problem was, it was expected to make a direct flight all the way to an international destination. I was carrying a full load of fuel. So imagine having to come and land on a belly on your fuel tanks, and what would happen at a velocity of say 400 or 500 kilometers per hour. So we panicked in the sense on the ground, made preparations, but the plane was therefore required to fly around for 3 hours to exhaust the entire fuel and come down to the bare minimum. So the possibility of explosion would be the least, you know. The good news is that finally at 7, Nimi, when I messaged you first to say I will not be able to participate, 5 minutes after that, we got the confirmation that somehow the landing gear had unlocked itself and the plane had landed back in Bangalore and everybody was safe and sound. And I presume many prayers were answered in that 5 minutes. So that's what happened this morning.
Wow. You know, I'm still kind of absorbing that information, to be on the ground, seeing something like that in real life. I mean, it's real life and death, you know, in the case of hospitals and aircrafts and, you know, all of that. It's just one of those things that really touches all of us so closely. And, you know, in this pandemic, when you had to have people there ready, Sajid, what were some of the things that you needed to take care of? Because I know you have people that work from around the airport. Were there challenges in the initial days of the pandemic for you? Is the screen frozen?
I think so.
I think Sajid's screen is, okay. I think he will join back, so we'll wait for him. So I'll move to Ganesh. Ganesh, I mean, it's not as dramatic as a plane crash or anything, but but it's what really keeps us going, right? Food is an everyday matter. It's a simple thing. We don't think too much about it, but we don't have it. We're thinking only about it. right? So you had to have your stores open, your facilities running, and what was it like for you in the initial days? Because we also know that in your kind of business, you have, Sajid will come back to you in just a bit.
Thank you.
You have a lot of people, young workers, many of them migrant workers, and your business was booming at that time, right? I mean, nobody could go out to buy, but they were ordering and they were buying all kinds of food, stocking up. There was fear that there's food not going to be available, so there was a run on your stock. I'm sure it was chaotic. And for the audience here, I must also add here that Ganesh joined more only in December or January of this year, just a couple of months before the pandemic hit. So I'm sure even as you were settling into your new job, you had to be handling something as big as this pandemic. So what was those initial days like for you, Ganesh?
Yeah. Just to give a couple of sentences on the context. More has around 650 stores across 200 towns in 10 states. And March was probably the best month in terms of sales for More. We met all our targets because there was heavy pantry uploading that was happening by the customers. I think 2-3 things were there. As soon as the pandemic started, we were very clear that we needed to keep the stores open. And we have 650 stores, 12,000 odd employees. So we actually communicated to everybody that, hey, we will take care. We know that you're going to put yourself in the line of fire, that we will take care as a company. I think that was the first assurance that we gave. The second was we needed to keep the business on. And we realized that we are essentially a trading company. We buy stock from various FMCG companies and other kinds of companies, and we sell them in our stores. And we found that there were a lot of supply chain gaps in our procurement. So the stock just was not available. So there was a lot of intensity within the company on how do we ensure that the stores are all filled up. The third one, and it's a big one, it's about grappling with the uncertainty of how the situation is going to evolve. Different states were imposing lockdowns at different times, and all of it had an impact on our store performance, right? And we are a retail is a low margin business. Costs are very, very important, and therefore we needed to strike the right balance between what's right for the business and to keep the business going, because that's important, and of course do the right thing from a pandemic perspective and not overreact as well. So it was about taking decisions that was just right.
In terms of getting people to come to your stores, because your stores needed to stay open, right? Even during the lockdown, except for grocery stores and essential grocery stores and pharmacies, I think everything else was locked down. So how did you get your people to walk into the office? I mean, to their workplaces? And there were quite a few migrant workers, I would imagine, in your kind of business. So, like Partha said, a lot of nurses just left. Did you have people leaving when you needed them the most?
Yes, I'll talk about two things. We had to do the classical HR approach for incentivization. So we did give a hardship element to all people that were there in the stores.
There's a little bit of a challenge hearing you clearly. Is that just me or?
I can hear you clearly.
Okay, so then you were breaking just a little bit for me.
No, it is breaking a little. You're right.
Okay. Is it better now?
No.
There's a certain echo and
There's a bit of a static, Ganesh. Maybe something with your headphone. You could check.
Is it better now?
Yes, it is.
It is, yeah.
Okay. Now, we had to incentivize people. So we gave a COVID hardship allowance to every store employee that came to work, right? We also took a lot of safety measures to reassure them and said that, hey, we will take care. We also said anybody who had cough, cold, fever symptoms, we said they can take off for 14 days. And that would be a completely paid leave. In our distribution centers, we have a lot of migrant labor. A lot of them went back. And therefore, we had to find alternative means of having the distribution centers to work. So we had to go to nearby villages, convince families to send their kids over to the distribution center. In some places, we arranged food. In some places, we arranged housing. In some places, we arranged transport. The important thing is we can't do it for everybody because there is a cost associated with it. And therefore, it was very, very selective and depending on the need. We also had a very unique situation where a lot of people had gone back to their villages and hometowns and not attending. And during the lockdown, we gave them full pay. But once the lockdown ended, we couldn't, we had to take a call, and therefore we communicated to everybody, hey, you need to get back to work. We can't run our stores without you, and we can't continue to pay salaries even if you're not coming. And once we took that call, I think bulk of the people got back to the stores.
Okay.
So I think balance was very, very important. You can't just go one way because you also need to ensure the health of the business.
Right. And I think, and those are some of the candid conversations, because it's nice to say that we have to take care of our employees, but there is a cost and there is the need for the business continuity as well. So how do you balance and keep that fine balance is something that all CHROs, I'm sure, were struggling with as well. Yeah, so we'll come back and talk a little bit more about, how you manage those operations. But Sajid, I will come back to what we started with in terms of what were the initial days like when you had to get people in, when nobody knew what was going on, and everybody, you look at somebody, you might catch COVID kind of a situation is how we were at that time. And you had to get people to come into work to manage operations.
First and foremost, Nimi, apologies. Mr. Murphy seems to be working overtime today. The connection seems to be going wonky, but yes, but we try and do this. We have the advantage of having an immediate family of 1,300 and an extended family of 28,000 people who come to work every day at the airport. Now, any of them or each of them could be a potential carrier, and my passengers can't be exposed to that. So therefore, what we had done was we've gone ahead to a method wherein we rotated employees. If I, for example, worked on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, my counterpart worked on Tuesdays and Thursdays this week, and next week the other way around. So which meant we manned this thing without anybody interacting physically with the other person.
Okay.
We created a rotation shift. That is the only way we could get the entire population to be sure that they are continuously safe and in a position to interact with the passengers who need it. From 24th of March, there was a complete lockdown for commercial flights. But what became more important is all the cargo flights, because they were carrying critical medical requirements globally, and that couldn't stop. So that business had to continue, and we have concessionaires and sovereign partners. Customs, immigration, and CSF are our three partners who ensure that the manning and the security of the airport is on at all times. So they were also covered by us, and we ensured that they were all made to come in rotations. We provided food for people who stayed at our premises. And we discovered that the problem that most people had than the COVID was the fear of getting COVID, and the airport seemed to be the so-called base from where COVID spread into the city. For people who lived around in the cities, they thought this was a foreign import and it came via the airport to the city. Now, that's the initial response that the public had. And, and because there was also this perception that it came from China. Now, obviously, you can only come to Bangalore from China by air.
Right. So did you have problems in getting people in, or did your employees face the social ostracization that the doctors and frontline healthcare workers faced?
Yeah, initially, they did have some problems, especially for the bachelors and the single people who stayed in groups around in the thing. There were the local villagers and the other people said, no, if you go to the airport, you can't come back here because you'll carry the virus back with you and we will all get infected. So then we had to take the help of the government machinery and the local administration who helped us to ensure that, that was set aside. What it also made us do was, there was the innate fear that if you go to the hospital, also there is a possibility of you getting the COVID.
Right.
So we actually had to, in order to cater to these 28,000 people, we actually opened our own COVID care center at the airport. And that is some of the initial steps. And we had a daily communication process, where we constantly sent out communication to all employees and all concessionaires and partners to make sure there was no panic situation. Because again, the airport is a very sensitive area of operation. Anything that moves and this thing there has a direct impact on the rest of the city.
Right.
So we had to be ensuring that we were at no point in time the rumor mongers of any of this information will turn out to be detrimental for administration. So communication, I think, was another key that made all the difference.
Yeah, and communication is difficult even in the best of times. And in a crisis, there are so many multiple filters through which it goes. We have no idea how it's going to land on people. And, a lot of the challenges that we saw was around that. Right. So, yeah, it really must have been something to handle that.
Great learning.
Yeah. And I think a lot of HR professionals on the call said, a great opportunity to learn, to try innovative things. Right. So I'm sure we all did that. Partha, coming to you, and you had sort of alluded to this, saying that, a doctor's profession is a humanitarian profession in a sense. I mean, they take an oath of caring for the sick. But at the same time, they also have their responsibility to their families, right? Because any exposure, you are carrying it back and you're, kind of, maybe there is that risk of your family members catching it. And extremely important for them to balance it. How did you manage that? Because in public knowledge, we know that some of the doctors, the senior doctors, were all doing online consulting, for example. Right? But there would have been a need for you to have nurses and doctors, actually taking the pulse and checking people on the ground. How did you get them to come in? Because there was so much anxiety and fear, far more than in any other industry. So did you have incentives? How did you manage even the exhaustion? The anxiety itself is an exhaustion for people, right? To do their best work. So how are you managing all of that?
Yeah, very good question, Nimi. So actually, it's like a double-edged sword. On one side, they are scared to come to the hospital. For example, we have one dedicated hospital in Bangalore. So the moment that hospital was earmarked as COVID hospital, the entire crowd, all 300 employees were scared. What is going to happen to them? How they'll be treated? What all protocols to be taken into consideration? All those things. And equally at the same time, they were also worried about their family members. Suppose they carry the virus and they have small kids at home, old age parents and all, they were very, very scared. And many people came to us saying that family is not allowing us to work. So citing all this, which were genuine also.
Yes.
So we provided them, we said we will give you all kinds of arrangements, maybe 15 days, 20 days, you can stay away from your family, and based on the situation, we will take a call. In spite of doing all these things, some people left, we couldn't help it. And then we also, as Ganesh said, we also advise people if they're not well or they have any symptom of cold or anything, they should stay at home and get them tested. And apart from that, what happened is we connected. See, by that time, 300 odd people have contracted the virus. They have turned positive. 300 means our employees, 300 odd people.
Right.
So family, it was a concern for the family. So what we started doing, we started connecting with their family. So most of the people, the nurses were from this Kerala or all this Northeast. So we started connecting with the families and in all vernacular languages and telling them that don't be assured that nothing going to happen to your ward or your spouse or whoever was there. So that was one that reduced the anxiety of the families. We did video calls, showed them the condition. Some people were asymptomatic and they were normal actually, but when tested, they turned positive. So these were the cases, and doctors who were above 60, they preferred to stay at home, but they continued to do the video consultation. So surgeries were handled by, again, like Sajid said, we also followed the same rotation kind of a thing. So we operated with minimal attendance only. The emergencies were attended, emergency surgeries were attended, and to motivate people, we didn't do any salary cut or no downsizing or right sizing of those. We were little liberal in terms of leave and all. If they stayed at home, we were not doing the loss of pay or anything. So it was treated like a normal duty. And people who suffered also and they took time, say 20 days, 25 days to recover, they were paid full salary apart from the care which was free of cost, the entire thing. So that actually brought down the anxiety and all. And what people saw when they came out of it without much of a hassle, so that gave confidence, and that gave confidence to the other people also. They gradually came out of that fear. They all, what it was initially it was a lot of panic and all. People were uncertain about the treatment.
Right.
It was seen as a very fatal disease, which was not. Later on, that was the realization. And we didn't cut any of the performance-based variable pay was released, and the hospitals which had done well last year, the incentives were paid to the employees. Even nothing, no benefit was withdrawn or anything. And instead of that, in addition to that, we also paid some allowances. It was called COVID allowances for certain people who were directly facing the patients. And the nurses, the technicians, or the doctors, all of them were given COVID allowance.
Were there also mass resignations? You know, we read reports of, and particularly women, nurses were, resigning in large numbers because their homes were not allowing, one of those diversity issues socially, because women are doing the caring job. We need the care at home, don't go and care for strangers, but care for the people at home, kind of a tussle. And a lot of nurses, is that true? Did that really happen on the ground, Partha?
So it's not true for Manipal. We didn't face any mass resignation, but like I said, people also because of pressure, they resigned. But if I compare the resignation or the attrition rate to pre-COVID times, we are better off.
Okay.
Yeah, we are
That's
still better off
interesting.
than last year, which is a very good thing.
Correct. And what could that be? I mean, why is that? Any thoughts on why that changed during COVID?
COVID is one is, see, they felt that they are safe here in Manipal and the trust factor is
That's
there.
nice.
See, the loyalty index and all in Manipal culture is pretty high. And they were all taken care of. They didn't face any kind of a problem during this time because they were also same time, they were also keeping a tab on the market, what is happening at other hospitals and small hospitals, large hospitals, what benefits are given, what benefits have been withdrawn. All kinds of things are, I would not like to mention those names, but all
Okay.
kinds of things are this. If you compare, they were much better off here. I think probably that prompted them to stay back and carry on their job.
Can I
Nice.
make one
That's
point
good to
here?
know.
Can I make one point here, Nirmala?
Ganesh, yes.
I
Sure.
think attrition in general went down post-COVID. And primarily it's because of the very tight labor market outside, right? I think economic activity went down. A lot of companies downsized and there was a lot of uncertainty. And therefore, there were not enough jobs and therefore people did not venture out. Our attrition came down by 50% in the back end. Even in the front end, it came down dramatically, primarily because people wanted to reduce uncertainty.
Yeah. So I think it's very interesting because
one comment here.
Yeah.
See, here my take is little different because hospital
Yeah,
were
hospital is different. Yeah.
they came back to normal also last couple of months, and they had a lot of requirement because the COVID numbers increased. So hospitals were falling short of people. Even they were hiring nurses at a pretty higher salary. They were willing to pay anything. To quote something, a fresh nurse who will get about say less than 20,000, they were paid 30,000 during that time, and advertisements were floating everywhere. So it will differ from industry to industry. I agree with
Yeah.
that it was job market was down and all, but not the case in hospitals. It is equally it's now it's as good as normal.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That
And interesting. Sorry. Interestingly, both your sectors, the industry sectors, healthcare and grocery, were businesses that sort of were needed and were booming at that time, in a sense, right? Put very crudely, I mean, you don't want the healthcare business to be booming, but it was, right? But on the other hand, Sajid, on your front, airports have a lot of very strong fixed costs. I mean, whether it's one flight taking off or 100 flights taking off, airports have to have those things in place for it to happen. And did you have to deal with, cuts or pay cuts or laying people off, or how did you manage your troops? Because you needed them when you wanted them, but at the same time, there's also this whole thing of aviation industry going through this gloom of jobs being laid off. We heard stories of pilots and air hostesses being laid off and all of that. And I'm sure it had an impact on your employees. So how did you keep things alive and engage for them? Did you have to take measures to handle this?
Okay, first and foremost, as management, we decided that people would be the last impacted by this pandemic. It is a conscious management decision. We actually paid our full bonuses as per normal routine. And thereafter, we sent out a clear communication to all employees to say that we would all be in this together. We would try and cut costs in all ancillary expenses and ensure that the last thing that we would touch would be the salaries. As I speak, with Almighty's grace, we still haven't had to go there. So
Wow.
we've managed to make the other costs. But you rightly said it's an infrastructure business, and upkeep and maintenance is extremely expensive. As a matter of fact, some of the buildings need to be perennially having the air condition on, because others, these are all air conditioned properties, and the air conditioning just can't be turned off. So whether pandemic, COVID, or anything else, if the building needs to be safe and healthy, it needs to be on air conditioned at all times. So those are overhead costs that will perennially be there as long as you run the infrastructure. But coming back to people, we did a couple of things which we thought were very critical. First is obviously we enhanced the insurance coverage for all the family members and the employees. That was a great assurance that we gave them. What we also did was we connected and got a full-time counselor, because we realized while work was not there, things were not there, there was a big, strong element of uncertainty which loomed over every employee and therefore their families. We had the children of the family not going to school, uncertainty of whether the airport is going to open, and all that. So we got in a counselor, and we left this option open to employees that there would be complete discretion, and anybody who felt that they needed talking to be done to a professional participant or a doctor, we would allow that. We also constantly gave these communications. As an HR team, what we did was we made telephone calls to every single employee.
Fabulous.
We actually went ahead and also spoke repeatedly to the lady employees. There was a special conscious drive taken wherein, because in our business, many of the lady employees are still young and single. So they were living here alone, or maybe in a chamari, which meant that the parents were elsewhere, concerned, worried. So that became our responsibility to ensure that those members of the family who were otherwise alone without the family emotional support needed the backing and support. So we ensured that they were repeatedly called, spoken to. And one important thing that we thought we did was we gave the complete discretion of wanting to come to work on the employee. If you feel you don't feel like coming to work today, so be it, keep your HOD informed. We will find alternate means. We trust you. We believe that you need to be in good health to return to work, and we are all in this together. So I think that's what has actually made the difference. And
excellent. Very high touch, especially in a time when, things were not looking good. And I think that's the essence of I guess, care in that sense. Um, a question, and I think this is applicable to all three of you in a sense, is that, you know, every employee probably did not have to come into the workplace. There were, I'm sure, in all of your businesses, there was a lot of people that were required to be on the front lines and on the ground. There were people that were probably working from their offices, which were reasonably safe, so to say, you know, in terms of the safety requirements and everything. And then there were a few people, and usually maybe senior people, that were working from the complete safety of their homes, right? How did you bring in equity into this? You know, did the person out there on the ground say, oh, my boss is sitting in an air-conditioned safe place and I'm here on the ground? You know, did you have those challenges? How did you deal with that? And, you know, Ganesh, can we hear from you? We'll start you know, a quick response on how you dealt with that.
So all our stores were open throughout the lockdown, throughout the entire time. Yeah, and we have around 12,000 people on the ground. We made a conscious decision to shut all our offices, and therefore the 1,000-odd management staff completely worked out of home. And this was a point that sometimes cropped up amongst the frontline staff, right? And you know, we don't operate in a single premise. We are distributed over 200 towns. You know, small towns will have 1 or 2 stores with 20-odd people, and therefore we did hear these murmurs. We addressed it through communication, right? And we explained the rationale. You know, there's no point putting more people to travel around all our stores, transmitting, you know, potentially transmitting the virus from one store to another. So I think it did come out. We managed it through communication, but I think our decision to keep our offices shut, I think was the right thing, because there's no point putting everybody at risk, and you wouldn't want people to go from one store to another.
Okay. So
in fact, we took a call to minimize the number of management visits as well, very consciously. You know, we have a large operations team whose job it is to go from store to store to look at the maintenance of our stores, how well they are run. We took a conscious call to even prune that.
Okay, interesting. Yeah, and Partha, from your side, I'm sure, you know, you also faced similar issues.
Yeah, we faced, see, first month, as I said, April was, we were watchful and we looked at the attendance and we rotated the staff based on the requirement. Footfalls were low, patients were less and all. And we also developed some kind of a hybrid model, which some people were allowed to work from home plus physical presence. So that was for the support people, say for sales, marketing, finance, or supply chain. But as far as nurses, technicians, and all those people they were there. There we saw how to rotate them so that they attend twice or thrice in a week. Same thing with the patient care people also. And the senior leadership team also, they were there. Actually, they were doing all the calls were happening virtually. A lot of physical things got transformed into virtual setup. But from May onwards, life is normal. It is no new normal for us, and we are doing a lot of things now through virtual setup. We have reduced the physical meetings, but meetings are happening as usual, but through a virtual mode. But we are attending the office. Here there was no concept of work from home. Actually, it didn't apply to us. Only
Okay,
April we were a little watchful and we operated with less attendance. But after from May we have been normal, including all our senior people, management staff, everybody. They are coming.
We're all at their workplaces.
They are coming to office every day.
Okay. And Sajid, was it any different for you?
We needed to have the operations running, so we had, like I said, staggered staff. And for the support functions, over a period of time, we've actually staggered it. We've now brought it to 3 days a week for everybody. And the operation staff anyway were given rotations to work, and they work for 4 days in a week, and the other 3 days they took off because we have enough staff. And the good news is, in a way, is that the number of flights have come down.
Right.
So we
Okay.
were operating, when we closed 31st of March, we had handled about 34 million passengers, which
I
is
know.
now expected to be closer to 12 million. So
Wow.
we have the comfort now, and since we only have a 2% attrition annualized, so our people are all with us, and
Excellent.
Choose really less.
yeah,
Yeah.
and this is thanks
amazing.
to COVID. We closed last year at 5.5 on 31st March. Right now, from April till date, it's been about 2%. But like I said, you know, one good thing that has happened in the process is that it's helped us actually to instill a great level of belonging and confirmation with the company. You know, the employee feels that they belong, and we really don't have to worry on that count as to what would happen. You know, we ensured that even in these kind of situations, when we are all together, nothing could get worse. So that,
Right.
in a way, we'd like to believe as management has been a blessing for us.
Yeah.
And it's kind of reinstated the confidence in the management, you know, on your side is the word I would like to use.
Amazing. Quite an amazing feat. And
Nirmala, can I
I
make
just,
one point?
sure, Ganesh.
Sorry, it's a related point, but I think the last 8 months have given us an opportunity to actually question our approach on offices.
Yes.
One of the things that we discussed in our XCOM was whether we needed to have this kind of office space. So unlike a hospital or an airport, our business happens in small stores, some hypermarkets as well. And the question was whether we needed to have large back-end office space. And a predominant view was that we have too much space and there is an opportunity to optimize it. Because we've been functioning fairly well over the last 8 months, and there is no reason why we can't do it permanently.
Yeah.
And that's a direction which I think we will definitely take.
And I think something that a lot of companies have learned from, you know, and as consultants and people in the inclusion space, I remember talking to companies even as late as February, March, and they would say, no, work from home is not going to work for my company. You know, people will goof off, they will not do their jobs, etc., etc. And I'm very certain they're all biting their tongues right now, because overnight, without any preparation, no budgets, no planning, we all went remote and we are managing just fine. We are resilient people, and it's important for us to, you know, point out to some of these things to say, you know, they always say there are some happy outcomes in every crisis. And I think these will be some of the learnings for many of us as we go forward, right? You know, connected to the operations bit itself, and, you know, I'm sure across the board and probably in the hospitals, it's a little bit more where, you know, people are empowered to take decisions at the moment. Doctors can't be checking with 20 people. They have to very quickly get on the job and do what they need to do. But in a grocery store or in a, you know, in your operations at the airport, there would have been a certain channel of, you know, approvals and things before you did anything. And in a situation where things was changing so quickly, and you as leaders probably didn't have any more information than what your employees had, because all of us were equally blindfolded on this, right? How did you democratize the decision making, and how did you empower your people to pivot and respond very quickly on the ground? I mean, was that the culture, or did you have to work on telling them you can go ahead and take those calls? This is a crisis situation and we believe in you. So any reactions to that?
Sajid, do you want to go first?
Yeah, I can.
Yeah.
What we did, Nirmala, was we actually got into a mode wherein we had a daily morning meeting by the CXOs with a few critical people. This is part of the BCM. So this ensured that any such critical out of turn requirements were met. That was one. We also adopted a 3-word formula, which was accept, adapt, and advance.
Okay.
We have to accept the new normal.
Right.
The only option we have is to adapt to it and move on, because the old normal is gone. Right. And finally, therefore, we had to advance and make the new normal the norm. Right. So delegation point of view, since we are also partly government owned, there are certain norms which we can't deviate from. But yes, the government machinery was also very supportive, and we ensured that wherever required, we could have spot decisions taken. And yes, there was a high level of, in principle, what's right needs to be done more than what's correct. And that's the spirit in which we took the decisions.
Excellent. You know, I'm actually reminded, you know, Sajid, you have a group of women who are manning your fire processes.
That's right.
Right?
That's right.
Right.
Yes.
And it's Were they all in full force there? Did you have any challenges? Just to kind of, I'm just curious because
No.
that was so
As a
special.
matter of fact, yeah. As a matter of fact, they are from my nearby villages and other places where we have taken a conscious decision to adapt them. And they were standing shoulder to shoulder with all our. The gender was the least of the concerns. Honestly, they were
Absolutely.
rostered and they were there. And I'd like to believe that that's because they own that airport. It's their airport.
Wow.
They
Amazing.
can get
We
you.
should.
Yeah.
Excellent. Yeah. Thank you. Partha, from your side, in
Strategy.
terms of, was it different at all for the doctors? Because, I can quite imagine that doctors are empowered to do, but about the, nurses and people like that, lower down in the hierarchy, how did you give them that empowerment?
See, doctors are empowered actually. The revenue act, lot of thing depends on the doctors, the number of surgeries done and all. What we did, we actually revisited our budgets for this year and revised it and planned it accordingly. The surgeries to be done at each hospital based on the availability of the doctors. So nurses, no issues because the routine work, it was driven by we have got nursing supervisors who are empowered to take the calls. But as far as doctors are concerned, the surgeries were actually discussed with them and planned accordingly because the business also revolves around that because on the number of IPD patients, surgeries, and to that, the COVID patients also were allowed to be treated at the hospitals, which were not the case initially. Initially, they were supposed to be treated only at the earmarked hospitals, but later on, government allowed the private hospitals to carry on the treatment. So we had set up the fever clinics right from the beginning. And in terms of strategy, we looked at how we can enhance the business, like looking at say more video consultations. That also increased. And then we looked at more home care facilities so that people reach out to the families for the sample collections and things like that. Of course, surgeries can't be done at their
Remotely. Yeah.
remote, so that was the thing. But rest all, wherever there was a possibility, it was looked at, and the revenue, everything was monitored. And on top of that, the people well-being was the most important, which was on top of the minds of the say the top executive of the apex level. We were also doing all meetings on daily basis and keeping a tab on the situation. And the calls were all need based. So people were empowered to take calls based on the needs. We're not very rigid in terms of taking decisions.
So, the WHO has come out with a report saying going forward, teleconsultation will be an essential service post-COVID. Yeah, so there was this thing. So do you see that as the future of consultation, clinical consultation in our country? Do you think that will happen?
Actually, it can be of help, but sometimes it's not of help. Suppose symptoms are there, which the diagnosis based on the symptoms, that can be addressed. Then it not come to the hospital. But that may comprise of say 10% of the crowd. Sometimes you need to go for the tests. Based on the test they can do, certainly it's of help. It can reduce their exposure to hospital and all up to some extent.
A point, yeah.
Yeah, but it's not a solution.
Sure, I understand. So, using that same thing about, technology and, again, there are reports that are out there which are talking about how a lot of people that were used to going to stores went online to buy their purchases. They were not actually walking into a more retail store, but were ordering online. And some numbers are thrown around in terms of 65% of, tier 2, tier 3, all the additions that you had to online buying were coming from the smaller towns and cities. Do you think the fact that you have a chain of, brick and mortar stores, so to say, will sort of go away, that we will not have that format going forward? What do you think? Will that change?
Okay, I think even in the US, 85% of food and grocery retails happens offline. Right? We have seen Omni going up tremendously. Amazon is one of our parent companies. They own a 49% stake, and you can order from more through the Amazon app, right? And we have seen Omni percentages going up, but majority of sales will continue to be brick and mortar. People want to come and see the vegetables they buy. We sell a lot of loose staples. They want to actually see it, check it before they buy. And we do a lot of, many of our stores are in tier 2, tier 3 cities. It is also some kind of a leisure activity for people in some of those places, right? It's the only opportunity where they can actually go out, meet a few people, and then come back, even in these times. So while the number of bills, which is a surrogate for number of customers walking in, has come down by 30%, the average ticket value has gone up, which means people are buying more each time they come, and therefore overall sales have not suffered. So I don't see brick and mortar going away. In fact, we've added 50 stores in the last 6 months in small places across the 4 southern states and Bengal. So I don't see that going away. Though I think Omni will continue to increase, go up. In fact, 10% of our sales in supermarkets is already home delivery. I think it will go up to 15-20%, but both will coexist.
Yeah, very interesting. And I am part of that profile that likes to go to a store. So it could also be a generational thing, I guess. Just seeing what you buy. My daughter would never think of having to do that. No, I'll just return it if it's not the right thing, is how she would look at it. But anyway, so that's...
Can I make one more point, Nirmala? Sure. This is on empowerment. Maybe it's a sectoral thing, but remember, we have 4,000 stock keeping units, including varieties of vegetables and fruits, which need to go from our distribution centers, collection centers, to 650 odd stores every day or every couple of days. And you order banana robusta 5 kgs more, it's going to be wasted, right? And that has an impact on our bottom line. And therefore, we operate with a lot of operational excellence and operational rigor, and it's all SOP driven. So there's not much freedom and empowerment on running operations, because you do one thing in one store, you multiply it by 600, 700 stores, the numbers go all over. And therefore, we did what Sajid did in BIAL. We used to have a morning meeting of all CXOs. We used to call it the COVID call. And we would take decisions very quickly, which could then get cascaded down.
Nice. Yeah, so, just a couple more questions before I turn it over to the audience. I'm sure they're waiting to ask their questions.
We've received a lot of questions, Nimi.
You've received a lot of questions. Okay, then maybe I will ask this as my last question. Just very quickly take the learnings from this. We've all gone through something very unprecedented, lots of learning opportunities. We've tried many different things. There was trial and error, lessons we learned, things that we would never repeat if we, ever had to face something like this. I would like each of you to just share, what was that one learning? What is it that you would have done differently? If you had known about this and known the challenges, what would that have been? We start with you, Sajid.
Let's hope and pray we never have to face this in the first place.
I agree.
Okay, so that's one. However, it also reinforced the ability of the human being to adapt and innovate. Yeah. And for once, all the artificial intelligence and virtual reality seem to fade away into this thing. Yes. The way the human being has adapted and turned the whole thing around, It also has improved the trust element and realized that we are all in this together. When something like this hits us, there is no geographical boundaries left. And
true.
So it was a great learning for us. Like I was mentioning, this is something that they don't teach you at Harvard Business School.
Oh yes, there are lots of things.
and therefore, not to take anything for granted was the biggest learning I think we took, and therefore also gave us the confidence to be able to take on anything on the chin.
Right.
So
nice. And Partha?
Yeah, so to be prepared for the uncertainties and be innovative at all the time, because based on the situation, you can navigate through it. That's what we realized, which was very uncertain in the month of April is not the case today. We are pretty comfortable right now.
Yeah, yes. people, we are very resilient. We just don't give ourselves a chance though to, do that. Ganesh?
I think in retrospect, I think we should have probably invested far more in technology, right? Technology helped solve a lot of stuff. And I think in retrospect, some investment on technology, especially on ways of working, would have helped. But otherwise, I think we were on top of what was happening, maybe reacting, but we responded and reacted quickly.
Okay. Yeah, thank you very much. And I think, this whole thing about, we work in the inclusion space, and I sometimes actually have the courage to make the statement saying maybe the pandemic has done more for inclusion than the last 10 years of other kinds of work that we've done. It really showed to us what we mean by a global village. One virus in China and the rest of the world was standing up and being locked down. It just shows the interdependencies that we have. In a sense, we're all recognizing that it's not enough for me to not have COVID, but I also have to ensure that my colleague doesn't have COVID because I could catch it, right? So the need for compassion, care, and looking out for each other has, I think, landed on all of us. And I'm really hoping that doesn't fade away when we get back to, maybe there'll never be business as usual, but, in a sense, when we get back to this new normal, I hope we carry the learnings, the change in priorities that many of us have made personally and professionally as well, in terms of what it'll be, etc. I think those learnings should stay with us as we traverse this path. I'm mindful that there are questions. Amrita, Smita, can you help with calling out some of those questions that you've seen?
Sure. So we have Subramanian Sai Gopal. He says most employees are now under severe duress because of being overworked by their superiors, untimely calls, meetings, deadlines, etc. They are literally in endurance. This is disturbing their professional and personal ecosystem and is creating a very stressful environment. How are your respective organizations working with employees to counter this serious concern? So this is to all the panelists, so we can maybe hear what they have to say.
Anyone can pick that up.
Let me give a quick response. I think this came out as a real concern. The pandemic was going through different stages. There were so many things that were happening, and we were reacting to it continuously. And this meant a big toll on our employees. And people actually came up and said, personal and professional boundaries are just blurring. We don't have time to have lunch and dinner with the families. So we took a conscious call. We said we will not have calls after 7 o'clock in the evening. We will not do weekend calls unless it's really important. And we said we would block half an hour for lunch every day. So we took some of these decisions, and I think it has helped.
Nirmala, I'd like to add something here.
Sure, Sajid.
As an employer, this is a great discovery for us that the pandemic is actually in many ways being very harsh on the ladies in India who work. They were expected to continue to be the professionals in the corporate world, and yet the extended role at home to look after the family got also added to that, which meant many of them were working all the time in one of the roles. Right. Yeah. As an employer, therefore, it became imperative that we understood this. And like I said at the beginning of the discussion, one reason why we brought about this professional counselor was to ensure that the lady employees especially had somebody to speak to, open up and get a little bit of consolation or solace, as the case may be, So we also made an effort as HODs to ensure that lady employees were permitted to work or invited for the team meetings only when required. They could adjust their own times, and they were given the freedom of deciding if they needed to even come to work, if there's some way they could manage it from home, because we realized the fact that the household needs to run 24/7 with COVID, without COVID, with the corporate world. And that's when it sank in a big way, the balancing act. The lady employees need to go in India to ensure that, neither role gets left out or lessened. So that's something that we learned, and we have realized that, going forward, that's something we'll be more sensitive about, learning from the pandemic again.
No, I think it's interesting how different organizations, and I must share this incident where I had one of our clients, also from an essential service company, as a matter of fact, in the energy sector, who called me up one day and set up a call, and it was a CHRO of the company, and he said, and I was wondering what the call was about, and he said, I'm just calling, it's just a courtesy call. How are you doing? I wanted to thank you for all the help that you're giving us, and just wanted to check that things were okay with you during the pandemic. And if there is anything that we can do to help. And it really warmed my heart. And I said, wow, that was something. I'm a vendor. A lot of people look at us, oh, you provide a service and you get out of the way. But here was somebody who actually saw us as a partner and called. And I sat down and I made a list of people I needed to call and say thank you to. So when they talk about a good deed passing on, I think when it warms your heart, it just kind of also passes on. And I think some of those really nice things, so which is why when you said you spoke to all of your employees personally and you touched their families, etc., I think those are really the moments of truth, and where trust builds and inclusion truly happens for all of us. Yeah,
well, I'd like to believe, I'd like to add and say that,
Sure.
so therefore, while everybody, all of us have been cursing or not being happy about the pandemic, it's also actually in many ways made us better human beings. It's something that I like to believe, more sensitive to the other person.
Yeah, I completely agree. And, sometimes I think, on Zoom calls like this, when you're with senior people, you suddenly see a dog or a young child coming and wandering. So you suddenly realize, they are not these sterilized managers and CEOs. They also have a home and they have a family. They have a dog that barks. It just kind of normalizes and makes us all, that human value, that humaneness in all of us, I think, has been to a great extent awakened thanks to the pandemic. So, yeah. Partha, unless you have something to add, I will ask Amrita to.
No, you can go ahead because.
Yeah. Amrita?
The next question is from Ranjit Palayat. He says, how are your companies leveraging technology going forward? So I think each organization can share their
Can I go first on that one? Sure. Pandemic is actually hastened our process of going in for a touchless process of travel. We have introduced at various spots where there was no, there was human interaction and there was touch involved. We have now ensured that most of these are touchless, and you actually can, from a distance, use your handset to check in, have your boarding pass validated, and there is also what we've introduced is known as a touchless baggage drop. So there is no human being picking up your bag and getting it weighed and put it in. You drop it in, it gives you a receipt and you carry it. And when you land at the other end, you show your receipt and collect your baggage. So I'd like to think that many of the things which have otherwise taken about 5 to 7 years to get introduced has happened in 5 to 7 months now. So that's from the airport perspective.
Okay. Now coming to hospitals, from the treatment point of view, video consultation was from the technology side. And now coming to some HR interventions, which we were doing it physically, say employee engagement activities or say L&D initiatives, we have moved to virtual mode. Like you are conducting e-town halls right now. We conduct it monthly basis. We are doing it physically. We have moved on to e-town halls where participation is as good as the pre-COVID times. And all our monthly reviews, everything is happening virtually. So these are some of the things. Let's say while COVID has been a disruptor, but it has forced people to look at changes. As Ganesh also said, technology. So nobody would have thought in hospital scenario how to be of help, but it is working out for us. We can do more. It's just a matter of being innovative and how to use it.
Yeah.
Nothing more to add than what Sajid and Partha said. Sajid's example was fantastic. The touchless experience. I think food and grocery still has some way to go before we go there. I know in the Western world you have automated checkout processes. I think we are some way away from those. We're not there at all.
Interesting. I had a question, and I meant to ask it at some point. You talked about the air-conditioned offices, and more stores may not be. Many of them are not air-conditioned, so maybe that's not so relevant. But as airports and hospitals, many of them, especially the modern buildings, are all without windows, and it's just meant to be air-conditioned only. And then there were all these reports saying in an air-conditioned car or an air-conditioned environment, the recycled air is carrying the virus. And how did you did those questions get asked, and how did you respond, or what is the truth behind it?
Yes, this is true. So we are avoiding such having meetings in all these AC rooms and all. If we keep the boardroom also open, if it has got windows and all, and have the meetings with minimal people, say 2-3 people in a room, not more than that. If it's a closed room, it is advisable to have meetings with more than 2 people and not for a longer duration.
Okay. So by ensuring that the numbers are small, you're still keeping the, the fear around air conditioning is what I was thinking, So with social distancing, you're saying it's not a problem.
Not a problem.
Okay.
Nirmala, we've been told that, 25 degrees and above is considered to be relatively safe.
Okay.
So you might now find your airports a little more warmer.
Okay.
But the reason for that is that it's better to be safe than sorry in that sense, And of course, the social distancing that we've tried to enforce. So to answer the question of the air conditioning, the inherent issues, if you turn off the AC, it causes frosting and, moss formation on the walls, which is another major element, which is detrimental to human health. So that's the reason why the AC needs to be kept on for unventilated buildings, which are the air-conditioned blocks.
Right. Okay. Very interesting. And so good to know these things, because otherwise these are questions that are there on people's minds. Amrita?
So technology interventions in very, very different ways, I think. So a very interesting question, which is tough times during this pandemic, employee care, safety and motivation all at the top of the list. What about employee engagement initiatives, and especially learning for employees? How has that been affected?
Yeah, it took a backseat during, say, April, May. For 3 months, we couldn't do what in our normal senses, but we gradually started getting into it with lesser people, lesser number of participants. But now we are seeing a lot more participation, and people have adapted to those things, and it is working out well. Say, one-to-one counseling things are happening, skip level meetings we are able to do virtually. And as I said, e-town halls are happening. So a lot of communication piece is being happening through this virtual mode. Only first 3 months we took a backseat. We couldn't do it. And people also took time to get used to all these things.
I think from our perspective, I think we need to pivot on our approach to learning and development. The classical approach of everybody coming to a classroom from different cities, spending a day or two, I think is gone. While I think the impact of the pandemic has reduced a bit from what we see in other countries, it's going to be a wave, right? And it's going to continue in various forms till we have a vaccine and the bulk of the population vaccinated. And therefore, I think it's important that we need to pivot to a new way of learning. We are not there yet. We need the right technology and we need the right solution. But the old way is gone, is my opinion.
What we've done at the airport is that with the drop in the passenger numbers and the other things, we've actually given the opportunity for the employees to reskill themselves. They are with us, they will reskill themselves in this duration when there is business is lower than expected. And the freedom again has been given to the employees. You can participate in a panel discussion like this. You can go for one of the MOOC platforms, get yourself trained with your immediate superior's permission. And we've very consciously moved from a 2-man days training per employee to a 6-man day per employee, and now mandated is to the HODs and the CXOs. But the liberty and the freedom lies with the employee to decide what he or she needs with the discussion of the immediate superior. And we are offering those platforms for employees to reskill or upskill themselves.
Just an add-on to, especially in Sajid, your industry,
Yeah.
and in Partha's industry, which is so highly skilled and constantly need to be updated. Um, there are certain roles, for example, where you need to be constantly doing the job. So if you're not operating a certain surgery, if you haven't done that in the last 6 months, you probably need to retrain and recertify to do that surgery. In the case of airlines, probably the ATR, for example, has to clock a certain number of hours, So how are you dealing with that? Because there is no opportunity for me to do that surgery, or there's no opportunity for me to do the number of hours that I need. Is there an exemption to that, or, how do you think it's being dealt with?
If I can,
It depends on the skills of the doctor. So a particular surgery cannot be done by a person who is not equipped with that knowledge and skill. So for that, we have dedicated doctors to do dedicated surgeries. So you actually can't debate on that. So there is.
But if they haven't done something, which a lot of doctors, because elective surgeries are now not being done, so when I go back next time, let us say to extract a tooth that's been bothering me, which I've been managing with clove oil, for example, do I know that the doctor is, current enough to do a good job? Tooth is okay to deal with, but maybe my heart. So how do we get that confidence?
No, we should, being the employers, we should be fair enough to the patients. We should be fair in our treatment. We should not adopt means which are unfair to the patient. So patient experience is on top of our mind, and we should not deviate from that. Just to make business or earn money, we should not adopt wrong means.
Okay.
Definitely not the case at Manipal hospitals. You will never see.
No, I'm sure. I'm just asking, how do you keep that learning current, is where I was coming from. When you don't have an opportunity to practice your craft, how are we going to keep, maybe there are technological simulations that you can do probably. I don't know, I'm just thinking out of the box at this point. Sajid, you have anything to?
Yes. So Nimi, just to answer your questions in two parts, the ATC people were obviously manning this because the commercial flights were down, but the cargo flights were on, and so were the other military and paramilitary and VIP flights. So the ATC was working. With regard to the pilots and the other people, obviously at the regular intervals when expected of them, they underwent the simulator training program and got themselves revalidated. And that's how they kept themselves up to date and ready to fly as and when called for.
Okay. Amrita?
So I'm going to combine two questions where we can, for the last 5 minutes, have the audience also speak up. I'm combining Manisha Tavde's question and Rachna Bhagat's question. So Manisha is asking, what are some measures you're taking to handle post-COVID scenarios or to face the new norms in terms of preparedness or any unique practices? And Rachna's question is around how do you see the long-term impact of COVID, focusing on how skills will need to be updated for or sourced differently to match the new reality. So how do you see the new normal is what people are looking at, and then we'll open it for audience interaction. So last question.
All right. At the airport, what we've done is we've actually had the CXOs every week addressing the employees via team meetings and things like that to tell them what is the current scenario, especially from the general viewpoint of the pandemic and also from the business point of view. So we've consciously ensured that the CXOs coming and speaking to the employees means mentally the employees are gradually being prepared to come back and realize what the new normal is without really being shocked into a new reality. So the CXO talks with the employees, which happen every week or every alternate week as a case may be, along with the other communication which go, the social media communications or the emails, have ensured that we are gradually easing them back into work. As management, we are conscious of that and we are trying to ensure, because in our case, that what happens is an unprepared employee translates into a bad experience for the passenger. And that's something that we're conscious and aware of, and we will try and ensure that that gap is bridged and there are no uh, unforeseen situations which cause displeasure to the passenger. So that's how we are making sure that the transition is smooth.
I see technology supplanting human effort in many industries, including food industry. Um, one obviously because it's safer. I also think with the uncertainty around how this pandemic is going to shape up, a lot of companies will move towards automation and technology to manage many of their processes. Let me give a simple example. Shelf edge labels. You see this small labels in stores mentioning the MRP, the price, etc. Now, you can actually put a LED strip, which can actually be, instead of a person printing it out and sticking it every 2 days on a shelf edge, it can actually be automated. We used to do indenting of fruits and vegetables manually. Remember, you have 100 kinds of fruits and vegetables in a store every day. It used to be done manually by somebody who would apply his judgment. You have Onam and therefore you need more of a particular vegetable or a fruit. Now, you're going to use advanced algorithms to drive this process. So I see technology supplanting some of human effort. I think the jury is still out on whether it's good or bad. But I see this happening.
Yeah, I agree with Ganesh. Technology is the way forward. I'll also give one example. We have developed one patient app, so in which you can track your entire history of your treatment, say at Manipal Hospital. You want to view your reports, or you want to see suppose sample needs to be collected. What are your preparation for that? How many hours of fasting? All those kinds of things are mentioned there. So no need to again reach out to people or physically go to a hospital. So a lot of processes can be cut down in terms of your physical appearance at the hospital.
Great. Thank you. Amrita?
So I think we can ask people to, we can take 2 questions. Is that okay? We are already at 12:30. So is that okay if we take 2 questions? Yeah, so people who would like to ask a question, you can maybe raise your hand. I can unmute you and you could speak up.
We've answered all their questions.
We do actually have one question from Rachana again. What is your viewpoint on vulnerable leaders during and post the pandemic situation? So if anybody wants to take that, in the meanwhile, we'll just see who raises their hand.
Rachna, I'd like to believe that the proof of the pudding is in the eating, and the vulnerability of the leaders have probably been already tested in the last 7 months. And the employees have therefore had an exposure or an experience to that. And I'd like to believe that the way the leaders have reacted and responded to the situation and herded the entire thing along is a proof. And I'd like to think that each industry has done its own bit to make that happen, given their constraints and limitations and challenges and the uniqueness therefore of that business.
Let me add on to what Sajid has mentioned. We need to remember leaders also have families. They also have emotions. They go through their own travails. Our CFO lost a cousin of his in Surat due to COVID. Somebody who was in his 50s. So people go through their own dilemmas, personal dilemmas. We just need to be conscious that they are as impacted by COVID as employees are. And I think it's important for everybody to be just sensitive of this. They don't have answers for everything. They have their own personal challenges. And everybody is trying to to do the best they can under the circumstances.
I agree with Ganesh. So tell you one more example. See the dedicated COVID hospital which we have in Bangalore. The center head, he turned positive within few days of the hospital being positive, COVID hospital. So he turned positive and he had suffered for almost a month with a few complications. And before he came out, he actually went through a very bad phase, missing his family with small kids. So I agree with what Ganesh said actually. We need to be very sensitive about the people and all. So.
So Subramaniam Sai Gopal had raised his hand, so I'm allowing him to unmute and go ahead.
Thank you, Amrita. This is on a lighter note. Sajid, Ganesh and Partha, thank you so much for your inputs. I was a frequent flyer until the pandemic happened, and I've started flying back again. My question is to Sajid. Prices have come down considerably across the globe, everything, but I still feel that the cost of refreshments and eateries has not gone down yet, Sajid. Can you do something about that?
Okay, to answer your question, first thing, maybe it's too early in the day to be answering that question, but yes, there are rates that have been fixed at the airport, which has been cleared and approved by the government. So I guess there's very little probably we at the airport level can do because these are contractual rates and cleared by the government. But yes, I can hope and pray that someday it will meet your expectation and we are actually in a position to serve your meal on the house.
That will be great. We'll have this deal with more to give it to you at a lower rate, so your rates can go down. You know, we can have some strategic deals happening right here. Okay, so I'm conscious that we have anything else that's a compelling question on anybody's mind before we let go of these people. I don't want to. There are always questions about how you manage things. You know, because for a lot of companies that we deal with, it's IT, banking, somewhere technology has played a big role, and you know, you always imagine them to be working out of home. It's not new to them. But for some of these essential services, it is a really big change. It's a huge change, and how you manage that is amazing. So I think if there are no other questions, I really would love to, for all of us, to give them a nice big applause for the way they have held things up. Thank you for doing all that you do, and look forward to more interesting conversations. And I do not want to say more interesting times because I want things to be nicer for all of us, where it's a lot calmer and less anxious in all ways. So thank you very, very, very much for having been with us. And thank you, audience. You've been a very good audience. You haven't fallen off. And I think that's testimony to the value that this conversation has given, to all of them. The inputs have been great. Thank you so much for the candid conversations.
Thank you for the invite, Nirmala and everybody. And lovely being part of this conversation with Partha and Sajid. Thank you.
Thanks, Nirmala, for having me as a panelist. And
of course.
Ganesh and Sajid also.
Thank you, Ganesh and Partha and Nirmala and Interweave. Thank you for setting this up. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And Amrita, thanks. Smita and my team at Interweave that have done a lot around this to kind of get us going this morning. Thanks, everyone. And we'll let you know of more such conversations. Do join us. Yeah? All right. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Everyone, please stay safe.
Yeah. Bye-bye.